All right, and we're gonna give the LinkedIn connection a couple seconds to take us live. Okay, so if you're joining us live, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the one of the first live events that the Society for People Analytics is putting on for you. So today I have the wonderful pleasure of hosting Heather, Richard, and Craig. And in this Building the Community and Meeting Our Executive Team event, we are going to get a little up and close personal, get to know these guys a little bit more, get to know SPA. We'll definitely hear some trends, and I will assure you that we are going to wrap up with some very practical tips. So if you are joining us live right now, I would really appreciate it if you can join me in a tech test, and let's make sure that our chat room in the backstage is working. So if you're on LinkedIn, just really quick in the chat window, tell us where you're dialing in from this morning, and we will get started and go from there. And we'll see if our messages are popping up for us. All right. While we're waiting for our audience to introduce themselves, dear panelists, so the very first question on my guide here is tell us about yourself. But if you have joined me in any of the events previously, you know I don't just leave it at that. So I'm going to make it a little more fun. It's morning for most of us here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you take your coffee this morning or tea, depending on whatever your beverage of choice is. Who wants to start?
I'm happy to kick it off. Hi, everyone. Craig Starbuck. I lead people analytics at Chime, as well as technology, and really excited to be a part of SPA. How did I take my coffee this morning? Black with a little bit of almond milk.
Nice.
Heather, all popcorn to you.
Sounds good. I am also a black coffee, but in a llama mug, because if the coffee's boring, the mug has to be fun. So we drink it out of a little llama mug for those there. Good morning or afternoon. I see some really familiar and wonderful names popping up there. So nice to see everyone joining. I'm in the morning time zone because I'm from Seattle, as I see some friends have said they are as well, or some others there. Good evening, afternoon to others. And Richard, I'll pop it to you. How do you like your caffeinated or non-caffeinated?
Yeah, I've got a fun one. I've got my coffee with oat milk, and I'm going to share. I've got a little Life is Relentless crab. It's a very fun little dour way to start the day, but I'm doing better than that little crab, so that feels pretty good. But I'm Richard. I'm the Vice President of People Analytics Strategy over at One Model. I should have done a synchronized cup drink there, everybody. I live about an hour north of Pittsburgh. I've got two lovely kids over here that keep me very busy, and my wife, we're all up here. And just thrilled to be here today. Really, really excited to meet everybody. So excited to see all the names popping in the chat, and good to see you all.
Awesome. And I definitely see the chat coming in. So thank you for those who are participating in the little chat and telling me that the technology is working. It is a relatively moderated pace panel today, but that said, we are also taking any and all open questions. I have asked our panelists this morning if they want to riff a little bit or if we're going to stick to a guided question sheet, and all of them have agreed with me that they are okay riffing a little bit. So feel free to ping us any and all of your questions, concerns, thoughts as we chat along, and we will take detours, go down rabbit holes, and wherever this conversation takes us in the good course of the next hour or so. So first and foremost, let's talk a little bit about people analytics. And Heather, since you and I have literally just met maybe like 20 minutes ago at this point, I'm going to start with you because it'll be a little selfish session for Lydia here as well. Tell me about your career in people analytics. What was that aha moment that you're like, yes, people analytics is it? And quite frankly, when was the first time the two English words, people analytics, even came on your radar?
My aha moment was a true aha moment. People analytics wasn't a term, but the aha was there. So I started out in animal psychology. I was going to be working with monkeys. I actually spent 3 years working in a lab, training monkeys how to play computer games and studying their brain activity. That was literally my job for 3 years. And I needed to figure out how to do a particular type of analysis for my research. And because I was in the animal psychology, the psychology journals were just the first ones that were in my search all the time. I typed in the analysis that I needed. I popped open the first journal article that had it as a keyword. I started reading. And the article was about how to use regression to identify discrimination in the workplace. And my mind exploded. I was just like, wait. You can use data to find out if people are terrible and then like do something about it? This is a thing? And then I read all the articles that article referenced, and then I read some other articles, and then I was having this like crisis moment of what am I going to do with my life? Am I really going to go get a PhD for 8 years just to like get better at shoveling monkey poop? What do I want to do? And I literally changed my entire trajectory and switched to industrial organizational psychology afterward. So after my bachelor's, that was very much animal psychology and cognitive neuroscience. I decided, you know what? I want to go do this other thing. And my first people analytics job was, in fact, focused on affirmative action, equal employment, and using analytics to identify discrimination and to support those. And so it was a true aha moment. Now, the term people analytics came like a decade later, and I'm happy it finally came, but that was when I fell in love with the field, and I've never been happier and never looked back. And you can do all of that stuff and so much more with it.
That's
awesome. Wow. I am so glad I asked you this question to start us off with, although you did set the bar relatively high for Craig and Richard there. So Craig, I'm going to move on to you. How did it all start? How did the affair, if you will, with people analytics start for you?
Yeah, that's a tough one to follow, Heather. I'll do my best here. But for me, it was a pretty different journey. The first decade of my career, I actually started off in technology, primarily data engineering, a lot of application development. And I reached a point where I was pretty miserable at work. I was on call 24/7, working production incidents, little to no sleep. I had a little kid at the time, and I thought, in 10 years, I don't want to be doing this. And I remember sitting at my desk after a night of working production incidents, very sleep deprived, and I pulled out a sheet of paper, and I've shared this story often. I wrote down on that paper everything that excited me, everything I had done that I was interested in doing, everything I hadn't done that seemed remotely interesting. And I looked at this paper, and it had technology, analytics, because a large part of my role had been supporting analytics teams like actuaries working in insurance, as well as others who were trying to make decisions on mortgage applications and mortgage loans in a banking setting. And so I had some familiarity with analytics through that. But one thing that caught me by surprise is I had written down organizational behavior. I was very intrigued by like, how do we make work better? And I thought there's probably no field that brings these seemingly disparate disciplines together. So I started researching. And at that time, I don't know that it was people analytics. I think it was called HR analytics at the time. But I wasn't aware of a field like this. And it seemed like there were only a few tech companies like in the Bay Area that were investing in it at the time. This was like 2010, 2011. And I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to make work better, because I realized that it's really important that the work we do is meaningful, that there's purpose in it, because the majority of our waking hours is actually spent at work. And if the majority of our waking hours is miserable and it's unfulfilling, that's really unfortunate, because that carries over to other aspects of our lives. And so for me, I thought the best path to getting into HR, being that I was a techie on paper, was to go back to school, learn something about social psychology, how to research human behavior in organizational contexts. And on the heels of that program, there was a company that took a chance on me, and I had the opportunity to lead Workday integrations, which was kind of my past in data engineering. While I figured out this thing called HR analytics and like all these different functions that I was now tasked with supporting. And that just kind of set the stage for every opportunity that has since come. And it's a field that I've come to know and love. And I think it really matters. You know, it may sound cliche, but I really do think people analytics can change the world. I think it's a force for good that can truly change the world. And I'm just like blessed and super thankful that I get to wake up every day and do this.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I think when you said the words Workday integrations, you may have sent a shiver down a few of our attendee spots for anyone who's dealt with that before. All right. So to our LinkedIn audience, if you are just joining us right now in the live chat, feel free to pop up any questions, comments, where you're dialing in from, how you're taking your coffee, and all that fun stuff. I do see that we've got most of the continents around the world covered. So thank you for joining us, even if it is evening time where you are. Richard, I'm going to move on to you. When did the two words people analytics make your radar, and how did you get into this world?
That's a good question. If I think way back, so I actually got my start in nonprofit. So I was working in nonprofit, project management, some financial analytics, just kind of finding my way a little bit. And I had a similar moment to Craig where I kind of took a moment and said, okay, what do I want to do? If I could do anything, what would I like to get up to? And I knew I wanted to do something with people. I knew I wanted to do something with data. I knew I wanted to get paid a little bit more someday. And so I started doing some research. Like, how do I make this happen? And really, when I think back to it, it was I wanted a job where I could read research papers as part of my job. That was a big part of it where I'm like, how do I find a way to get paid to do the stuff that I love to do? And absolutely, I found that. But I think that moment was pretty early. So just for anyone out there that's trying to break into the field, I had trouble breaking into the field because really coming from a non-technical background, coming from kind of outside of private sector, making my way over to kind of the for-profit, making that pivot. When I applied to a lot of people analytics roles, they said, hey, you're not technical enough. When I applied to HR roles, they said, wow, you're way too technical for this. But I found my way to an HRBP role. And there was a moment when I was an HRBP where we had run a really fascinating experiment with our Northeast region around attrition. We partnered with a university, a fellow named Brooks Holtum on job embeddedness. He's just tremendous. And we ran this localized experiment. We got a great result. We figured out what was going on with attrition. And I remember doing a readout to the VP of sales for that region. And he said, this is the first time I know for a fact that HR has done something. And I was so proud at the time. I was just like, oh my goodness, like I did it. I'm here. I'm proud that we're doing this. And over time, I think I've gotten more reflective about that phrase where I'm like, oh no, why haven't we been able to make this happen more broadly? And so that really kicked off a mission within my career to get into people analytics, but also break down barriers, get more people connected. I worked across Facebook, Uber, Nike, Argo AI. I got to see some very different teams. And coming over to One Model, I get to research the space now. So I have a lot of time that was the side of my desk stuff before is now full time on my desk. And I just could not be happier. Being able to kind of research, live this space, connect people, build the community. It's a tremendous, and like Craig said, feeling very blessed about that.
For sure. Thank you for that story. And to our audience, in case you can tell, these three are literally glowing as they're talking about their love for people analytics. So I think for me, there's a couple takeaways in what we just talked about, right? Number one, it's the fact that it really doesn't matter what you're doing today. It's about the passion, about the desire to make a difference in the workplace through data that has led all of us into the path for people analytics. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking to yourself, gee, I'm doing this thing right now. I have zero HR experience. I have no idea what this 4 letters EEOC actually mean, and all of the compliance benefit comp stuff just sounds like mumbo jumbo to me. Yes, I've been there at one point in my life. That's why I know. But all of that said, you can get into people analytics. And I will paraphrase a comment someone pinged me in a couple of days ago, basically saying people analytics community is one of the, if not the most welcoming and friendly communities they have dialed into professionally. So again, if you're thinking about pivoting your career path, developing your career path, whatever it looks like, this is the reason why the Society of People Analytics has been created. Ping any of the members, ping any of us. I'm sure we will squeeze out time to make a conversation happen. Okay, so enough about us. I'm going to pivot the angle to the market a little bit. I know in our guide it says what are the most exciting trends and challenges. I'm going to break that down a little bit. So standing on January 2025, which is when we're recording this right now, reflecting back on about the last year and a half of what I call the AI and HR whiplash that I'm personally experiencing, a little bit of the people analytics hyperloop as well. What excites you the most today as we're talking about people analytics? It can be like 2 or 3 things. It doesn't really have to be one. Craig, I'm going to start the conversation with you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of promising applications for AI in the way we action. And what I mean by that is I think historically applications in the HR tech space have been very just logical based. Where if this is the opportunity, here's a link to this like LinkedIn learning course. And it's very cookie cutter in that way. And that's not altogether bad. Like, I think that's a good start. But I think in people analytics, there's so much nuance about what's happening in certain pockets of the organization. And to the extent that we can bring all of that together and make a more tailored recommendation about how best to move the needle based on all of these unique factors, I think the opportunity, the probability for real impact is much higher. And I think for AI, like if you put these pieces together, it's really good at synthesizing a lot of information. And I think there's an opportunity to pick up on hotspots that humans may miss, right, as we're synthesizing all that information, both quantitative and qualitative. And so as I think about how we support organizations, number one, I think people analytics will continue to exist. I don't think this is like we're going to be replaced by the bots, but we will be augmented by the bots. We will be augmented, and the way in which we provide value to organizations through people analytics, I think, will fundamentally change. So I see technology, whether it's AI or otherwise, as a catalyst for having more impact on the organization and doing it at scale. And as I think about people analytics investments, even highly resourced teams are often under-resourced relative to the problem space, relative to all that we need to do, all of the demand for our team's capacity. And so to the extent we can do more with less and we can extend our resources further through the use of technology, that's what gets me really excited.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And we do have our very first question in from the audience, or at least one that popped on my chat. So I'm sorry if I missed you, if you showed up earlier. So here's a question for all of us to think about. How can AI-powered people analytics help organizations achieve a truly data-driven and human-centric culture? So Richard, I know you have talked a lot about it. I know you've written a lot about it, and you're probably jumping at to answer the question. I'm going to pass it over to you. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll take a hot take here. I think that AI and HR is not people analytics. And I want to be, I've kind of held true to that kind of over the past couple of years as we've talked about this and as it comes in. And I've seen a lot of people analytics teams get saddled with AI projects because they say, hey, you're the tech nerds. You keep doing this too. And it's added to your plate. There's no extra resources, but you've got to do this work now too on top. AI should be woven and fundamentally throughout the HR organization. I think right now we're in this moment where the people analytics leader has just kind of caught the ball in a lot of places, not always to the positive though. So when I think about analytics, one of the interesting things that we're dealing with this year, and one of the challenges is really this: what is analytics going to be in this post AI world? And what does analytics mean? And I think what I'm finding fascinating is that the AI is going to make our world a lot easier and let us get to the stuff that's really hard, which I like. And I know a lot of us like. And a lot of us are very passionate about doing hard, big things within the people analytics space. But the difficulty here is not in joining lots of data sets, and the difficulty is not in having to politically navigate and try to get access to everything you need to get to. Like, that's where AI can really lend a hand and lean in really hard. The difficulty is social science. And we want to get back to that like core area of consulting and engaging with the science of the space. I think that's the promise of AI, is going to allow our people analytics teams, ideally standing on top of AI, to go further and become more human throughout this. So between people analytics, probably a little bit more of a lean towards the people side. And I think that's tremendously exciting for 2025.
Awesome. I'm going to put a pin on that thought for a moment because I definitely want to dive into something that you just said. Heather, I'm going to move on to you. What is something that excites you about the state of people analytics today?
I think my response is going to go on both of those questions. So yeah, and I do appreciate that comment about the AI and the human-centered. And I want to try to mash a whole bunch of things that were said earlier together, which is Craig talked about how people analytics has so much power for good. And the first thought that went through my mind was maybe, but that's only because people have the power for good and can use people analytics to do good. And so I think there's this possibility and this ability to really use this AI-powered people analytics approach to do what was being asked about, to create this data-informed, human-centered culture. And I do think AI can help with that. And connecting back to what Richard said, it's not about shoving AI in and forcing AI to be synonymous with people analytics. It's about saying, how can we do more? And how can we keep the human-centered part and maybe lean into those parts that have been more difficult for us. So the thing that I am excited about, and this would have been my answer before connecting all these things, I'm excited about finally getting into all of that qualitative unstructured data. Humans don't fit well into numbers. We are not very good at being in categories. We just don't fit well. We don't squish into boxes very well. We have feelings, we have experiences, we have all sorts of contextual things that happen. And if we really want to be people analytics professionals, we have to get better at how do we understand and draw insights from that messy data. Historically, that's been very hard to do. There are some amazing qualitative researchers who've built up quite a bit, but it's still hard. It takes a really long time. It's subjective, it's difficult. I don't think that AI is anywhere near the skills of a good qualitative researcher right now. I will put that out there. However, it can help to get us closer. We can start using it to do some quicker coding, to do some quicker cleaning, to get our stuff where we need to be, and start actually listening to people instead of asking them to check the box so that we can then add it together and divide it by another number or put it in some model. And so I'm excited that AI might bust open this opportunity to really get into the unstructured, messy parts of what it means to be a human in the workplace and what it means to kind of listen to that and then use that information to drive the informed decision. So I'm hopeful that this tool is going to take us to a, not like a higher level, just like that other side that we keep not going to, and like, let's go over there some more. You like, let's go hang out over there. So that's what I'm really excited about.
Thank you to all of you for bringing a lens of practicality, if you will, into something that has, for better or worse, been in the hype cycle for so long at this point. So I think the next question I'm about to ask, Richard, was related to your comment, but also one of the other questions we have in the chat, which is the C-suite perspective on AI and HR. From a practical advice perspective, I know I'm speaking to the audience when I say that more than one time we probably heard, hey, you need that people analytics tool, or hey, you need like X amount of dollars to buy that people analytics tool. Why don't you just use AI and like let AI make it all happen? Put yourself back in the shoes of like a manager, a senior analyst, or a senior manager for a moment with me here. How would you respond to the leadership team or to someone who is telling you like, oh, forget people analytics tool, get Google Sheets, get Excel, lop it into AI, and your job is done? Richard, I'm going to start with you and I'll pass it over to Craig.
Oh, I love that question. I heard a horror story recently, which I think we need to broadcast a little further, which was when they released this particular company, when they released their survey results, all the managers start immediately throwing all the qualitative comments into ChatGPT saying, hey, it worked. What they found was that it was generating new employees with comments that were not in the data set. And so the level of hallucination there to generate a employee that was saying something about somebody in some way is just unacceptable. And I think that's a theme that runs across AI usage across HR is our error rate has to be zero. We can't get this wrong. Behind every data point's a person and a family and friends and livelihoods. And the relationship between people and work is so strong and deeply integrated in what their lives are that our responsibility as analytics leaders within this space is so much higher. I feel a little uncomfortable saying it, but I believe we are so much higher than the other functions that are out there, the finance, the marketing, the sales, the et cetera, where they can get things a little bit wrong and it'll be okay. And we can kind of round the edges. We can't do that with somebody's benefits or somebody's grievance policies or somebody's pay. We have to get this right. And so one of the things that's just very complicated about these tools and the situation we're in is that if you don't have data architecture and if you don't have data awareness about how the data is built and governed, your AI is going to be very poorly done. And that's something that as people analytics teams, we've been pounding the table for years. We say, please, let's fix this data problem. The ops team, come on, let's go. And we haven't really gotten the support we needed. I'm hoping and I'm encouraging people analytics leaders to round up all of those problems with AI, use them to your advantage to get your people analytics data fixed. Because we needed our data fixed anyway. So let's at least use that hype to go after it. But I think that emergence of that data space, somewhere between tech and analytics, we're going to see that continue to grow over the next couple of years, where it's not quite people analytics, it's not quite HR tech. It's this world of what does people data mean? And it's something we probably should have had already. But obviously, there's a soapbox I can get on and scream about for a while. So I would love to hear what everyone else is thinking about that too.
All right, Craig, over to you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Richard. I've often said to the teams I've led, observations in a data set are human beings. And these are often subtle cries for help that we have the responsibility of surfacing to those who can authorize action. And I think when we view our work through that lens, it takes on new meaning. It's not just statistical modeling. These are human beings, as you said, with families, with friends, with aspects and dimensions of their life beyond the work context. And I think it's important that we never lose sight of that. As I think about that question, I think fundamentally it comes down to context. Why can't we throw something into Chat GPT and get a recommendation and move on? It comes down to context. And I believe I've led 7 different people analytics teams now, 7 different companies. I think the most important thing that I've done is partner with people partners, those who have the context. I don't have that context, right? I'm not in there with these business leaders with my ear to the ground. I don't have all the context. I know what I see in the data. And so, my recommendations on the basis of data would be ill-informed without that context. And so I think it's really incumbent upon us as people analytics practitioners to partner with those who do have the context, namely people partners as a proxy for the business. Even better if you can develop that strategic partnership with the business directly, and make sure that any recommendations on the basis of our insights are informed by the context.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And last but not least, Heather.
I was being distracted by all the questions going on in the chat.
I'm trying to describe it as quickly as I can. I'm
just going through it. I'm like, oh wait, I'm like, there's so much happening here. No, I was kind of following along with all of those things, but I'm feeling like we've got so many other comments going on that my mind is being split on which points I want to tie together. We've got questions about like whether or not it's fitting in the ETL dashboard. We've got the ethics in AI. We've got where should it sit? So I heard Craig mentioning, the people partners, but we have people asking questions like, but where does it sit in the organization? So since we're just jiving here, I couldn't decide which direction I want to go. So Lydia, I'm going to let you decide which direction you want us to go.
So let's do this because I'm pacing us out into the giant rubric that I've been given this morning of where to get all the questions. I think let's go with sticking to the original part of the conversation of how do you respond to something in the practical skill sets. I think part of how you respond to these types of like where does AI fit is also very dependent on where does your organization sit in the broader structure. So we're going to change this up a bit and let's talk about where ideally, not even ideally, where should people analytics be? Does it matter where people analytics is structurally in an organization? And depending on that, how would someone measure success?
Ooh, this will be interesting because I kind of think maybe we have different opinions in this group. I don't know.
I know. I think I may have just accidentally started something here. Let's see where we go with this.
Yeah. So I personally, and I'm just going to start from this. So I currently, and I didn't say this in my introduction, but I was a practitioner in people analytics for about 15 years. Most of my career has either been in the consulting side, kind of coming in and helping organizations, or within an organization as part of an HR team. And yes, being handed also technology operations, but then people analytics. I'm now a professor. And as I was deciding where I wanted to be in terms of academia, a natural first place is the business school, because that's where they talk about HR stuff. And yes, I do teach a class in people analytics at UC Berkeley Haas Business School. Hey, I love that place. But when I was looking for my home, I chose to join an information school. Information schools are not widely, they're not in every university. They're sort of this blend between the business and the computer science and the social side of the world. And so the reason that I'm bringing this up is, to me, people analytics sits at the center of technology, business, and sociology. And so to say that it fits only in the business function doesn't fit with the way I perceive it. I see it as adjacent and part of the technology systems. I see it as connected to, how we think about data systems, information infrastructure, architecture, underlying, just structure of how we think about knowledge and information. I do see it as part of business decision making, strategic approaches to the organization, but I see it very much as a social science as well. And I see it as something that can sit outside of either of those areas. And so I don't really feel like it should exist in only one place. I do understand that it is predominantly in the HR function. I also know that historically that wasn't true. When I first ran around in this world, it was probably half in the HR function, half in finance, believe it or not. And that's because workforce planning used to be more popular. Workforce planning is still popular, but people used to only know the term workforce planning. And that used to come up quite a bit in the finance function. You don't see that as much anymore these days, but we definitely saw it more on like the operations side of the organization. So I'm going to say it doesn't have a home. It just has departments that choose to adopt it and welcome it. But I do want it to stay with the people who care about people. And I do think that the HR function as a field is the most equipped to consider the human and to keep the people in people analytics. And until finance and operations and tech can kind of prove that they care as much about the people as the dollars and the tech, then you know what? I'd like to keep it with the ones who have human in their title.
Yeah, I hear you. And it's also the departments who have the budget to fund the entire team that's required to do the work. Yeah. All right, Richard and Craig, I'm going to let you guys pick who wants to go next.
If I can jump in, I'll be quick, Craig, because I want your thoughts here too. When I talk about people analytics, I try to separate the definition into the function and the act. The function being the group of people that are responsible for setting up the COE, the boundaries, the expertise. The act is decision support around the workforce. The act is required everywhere. Everyone's got to do the act. The function, I am an HR exceptionalist. I believe HR is an exceptional function and underrated, underinvested. I'll sing it till the cows come home. I love my HRBP friends, love the CHRO. The space where there's a quote from Stacey Harris's HR tech survey where she said when HR tech moved out of HR, those HR departments were 60% more likely to be viewed as administrative instead of strategic. So HR tech moving out, if we think about people analytics moving out of HR, we're giving up our decision support function, our group of people that help us make decisions about people and about the workforce and about HR. To do that to me is hard to imagine. So I am a firm people analytics as a function should sit in HR, but as an act, it's everybody's responsibility. We all got to lean in there to support people.
Yes.
I really like that distinction. Yeah, between function and act. I think that's really important because, in most cases, it's been my experience that as a function, you might have 2, maybe 3 people. And that means that we've got to touch thousands of people across the organization. How do we effectively do that with only 2 or 3 people, right? Yeah. How do we democratize access to people, data, and insights? I think it's through like training the trainer, so to speak. You want to equip people partners to work with business leaders, show what's possible, equip them to navigate the solutions, the data products that people analytics is putting out, and bring that feedback to the central team so that we can mature and enhance those products to make them even more valuable in terms of strategic decision support. But that's so critical because if everything falls back to 2 or 3 people, that function is not going to have much impact. So how do you scale the impact? I think it's through those partnerships, through that relationship, and making sure that every function is equipped to drive strategic decision support using those analytics and insights.
Yeah, for sure. And Richard, we are going to sound clip you with that little statement of making sure that everyone is involved. And we're going to play it on loop somewhere. So Craig, that's actually a perfect segue because I think, by the way, if you're listening to this either live or on recording, my guide says to go left. I think I've taken a few turns right. So if you're ever going on a road trip with Lydia, don't let me do an navigator. With that said, we're going to keep going with that detour because it's something Craig just said and the questions that we're seeing popping up on the side panel here, which is, yes, get the partnerships. We all know that in theory, that's the best way to drive people analytics forward. We have a lot of folks in the audience right now who are asking us, what are some of the practical ways of moving people analytics away from that ETL, away from that dashboarding, and fundamentally get people to use it, even if you're still sort of in that dashboarding business? Who wants to start us off?
I'm happy to start with that one. Number one, I think vendors have done a great service to the people analytics community in helping us move beyond dashboards. And I'll keep this very vendor neutral. There's a lot of great ones out there. But fundamentally, like, I don't enjoy building dashboards. Like that's like a means to the impact. Like I don't think many people enjoy business intelligence, right? And I actually think that is one role that will soon cease to exist, right? Like if I were to rub the crystal ball, I think that's something that we can automate. Gen AI capabilities with natural language prompts, I think will soon replace that legacy BI developer profile, and I think that's a good thing. I think where we can really have impact is leveraging the great work that these HR technology platforms provide, automating the data pipelines, the ETL, helping with data quality, helping to provide ready access anytime, anywhere to standard people metrics and trends, all these things that organizations care about. And then we can graduate up to more advanced and sophisticated questions that really move the business forward. I do think it comes down to relationship building. It's like knowing, it's like if you're in a sales role, like I've never been a salesperson, but I actually read a lot of sales books because I think it's very germane to what we do in people analytics. We're in the business in some sense of selling our solutions. Like, hey, like business leader, whether you're the head of engineering, you're the head of product or the head of marketing, whatever it might be, I want to delve deeply into your problem space. I want to understand your world, your unique pain points, and I want to co-create a solution that we can bring to bear to help you navigate these challenges. Versus a cookie cutter, I built a dashboard, here's the URL, please click, right? Like a build it and they will come strategy rarely is successful. Maybe never. I've never seen it be successful. But I think you've got to bring stakeholders along in that journey and create something that really has impact. And I think the advancements in HR tech have enabled us to move beyond ETL, management of pipelines, building of dashboards, and the maintenance that comes along with that. And instead lean on all of those capabilities to really understand how we can support the business and drive meaningful impact.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Whoever's picking up this next, Heather, Rich, I'll let you guys rock, paper, scissors for it. One of the additional questions we have is, does that mean IT is central in HR becoming less administrative and more strategic? So go for it.
Oh, that's an interesting one. Heather, I'll jump in. I'd love to throw it to you still too. I've always been big tent people analytics. I'm a big fan of reporting and ETL and having that be part of your function of people analytics. I think when it's not, one of the things that's been interesting I've seen is that reporting gets a lot of loops with people that need their help. So a reporting team, someone's like, critical board report, I need this tomorrow. And they service and they support. And they build up a lot of trust and credibility and network that people analytics teams, which may take longer for deeper research projects, miss. And so there's also an interesting triage moment when that report comes in and they say, hey, I need my attrition data, diversity data, headcount data, and comp data. And you're like, I think you're doing pay equity. Can we talk? Let's triage that. We need to get you into the right spot. So I think there's been a lot of people in analytics teams that have kind of rejected reporting and said, that's not me. Give that to someone else, give that to HR tech. And the danger there, you end up in this political situation where you might not get the demand you're looking for because you're not getting the touch points with your clients, because you can't triage, because you don't have control over how things flow. So I think there's a really interesting conversation about what is the technical act and, again, the function when it comes to this. Because I think keeping that big tent and bringing that all together has a lot of payoff from a political perspective for people analytics leaders.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Heather?
Yeah, going back to the kind of how do we make the impact and connect it, I always go back to, so what, now what? And that applies whether we're talking about the analytics, whether we're talking about dashboard, is if we really want to be connected to the business and have that outcome, it's always, why am I running this? Like, what is this? What am I trying to find out? And what can we change as a result? So I am a nerd. I have worked with plenty of nerds. And And, there'll be times where people that I've worked with are like, hey, this cool new analysis, we should totally run this. And then you have to stop and say, but what are we going to do with it? Is this something the organization even needs? Because if it's a pet project, maybe we should work on the side in a small amount of time to build our skills. But we need to be working on things that can affect change. What's it going to produce? What's it going to create? How is that going to play out? Same thing with your dashboards. If people aren't asking for it, don't build it. Don't build it just because that's what goes on the dashboard. Wait until it's been asked for at least 5 times. After which point you're like, you know what? I'm tired of running this stupid thing. Why don't we put it on a dashboard? That's the right time to use dashboards. Now you don't have to run it anymore. Now you do the other stuff. And so the more you can just say, we're doing this for these outputs. And I know a lot of analysts who run things that they can't affect change on just because the data is there. They're like, here's my data set. I'm going to run this. I'm going to run this. We do a bunch of like kitchen sink models. We're like, these 2 things are interesting. But then you run them, you find an outcome, and the organization can't actually make a change about those things. So why were we focusing there? So look at the things that we can affect change with so that when you are having those business discussions, it's on things where people get into the habit of making decisions and making change as a result of the information that's been brought. I think when that's your relationship, then you have that business connection. And I don't think that's limited to analysis separate from the dashboards. I think ETL dashboards can do that too. I am a fan of a nice business intelligence dashboard. I think they can do a lot. I'm with Richard on Big Tent. I might have it might be a big house because I do think there should be walls. I do think sometimes you need to not let reporting eat your analysis and vice versa. So I want some actual walls with a door that you can lock sometimes, but I'm still with you on all in one building there.
All right. So key takeaway for me in that one is the sort of mid 2010s open concept with your dog bed in the middle of the living room is not a thing for Big Ten people analytics, or shouldn't be a thing. But more practically speaking, I think, Heather, that's a really useful tip for our audience in terms of unless it's been asked 5, insert your favorite number here, don't stick it on a dashboard. And maybe as a fundraising mechanism for the Society of People for People Analytics, we should start making t-shirts that says I heart dashboards just to get the conversations going. Okay, so I am going to take us on a little bit of a U-turn, just keeping an eye on the time here. And let's talk about your roles on the board for Society of People Analytics. Heather, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a little bit more about your role. What drew you? Because we know that board commitment is usually pretty hefty. What drew you into it? And what's your top priority for this year?
Yeah, the number one thing that drew me to the Society for People Analytics is, quite frankly, it's not connected to specific other things. So there are some great other societies and groups and organizations, but most of them are maybe attached to a specific academic background. As we've already talked about, most professionals in people analytics don't come from one path. We come from so many different backgrounds, so many different educations, experiences, just life perspectives. And so the fact that this is a society that doesn't attach itself to any starting point and says, this is a community of practice, wherever you're coming from, whatever stage you're at, if you love this thing of people analytics, you're excited about it, and you want to connect with other people, then it's here and it's open and it's, agnostic to where you're at in that. We love you whether you like ETL or don't like ETL. We're all part of it. That's what really drew me. So that kind of not being connected to any kind of prerequisite was probably the thing that I wanted the most. Secondly, just the calling together. I do agree that people analytics is probably one of the most welcoming, nicest communities I've ever seen. And the fact that we can just help others find their way into it and connect and into the priorities, that's really my number one priority. And what I want is welcoming all. I still meet people who are like, whoa, there's a group of you all? And I'm like, yeah, you should hang out with us. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, you should totally hang out with us. And so that's why I want to be part of it. But that's also one of my goals is helping people find the organization and knowing that you're all welcome, you're all invited. And then to listen to people. Okay, now that you're here, what do you want? Like, this is your society. We don't have any prerequisites. We are agnostics. So whatever you want is what we will be. So what do you want? So that's one of my goals. And then just connecting people to people, people to resources, people to opportunities. I think that's what a society should do. And anything that we can do along the way to really help support that is where I hope we can go with that.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Richard, I'm going to move on to you.
Yeah, big shout out to Stephanie Murphy. Stephanie Murphy has carried this organization to kind of get this off the ground, to get this stood up. She and I started talking, it was maybe 2 years ago, about this idea of like, hey, we need something here. There's a gap in this market around how we educate, how we connect, how we organize, how we think about ourselves as a community. And she has just done an incredible job getting us to where we are. And it's a little funny, but I think what attracted me was like, I'm at a vendor now, but I saw that a lot of the education was coming from the vendors, and it was targeted towards decision makers who are buying tech software. And it's like, okay, I know what that game is. And the reality was, it wasn't a lot of education for the individual contributors, the people that want to become managers, the people that are new to the space, where there might not be a financial incentive to develop materials and resources and professional support. So I thought that's an area where a 501c nonprofit can really play a strong role to fill the gaps around education that might be missing for kind of private incentives. I think the other piece is, when I think about SPA, I think about a spot where if you've got time and energy and interest, you could pour that time, energy, and interest in, and you know that it will go back to a good spot. That's really a shining kind of vision for me with what SPA is going to be and can be, is this safe spot to volunteer, to support, to mentor. And I know that my time is going to be respected and valued, and someone's going to benefit from that time. It's a really powerful vehicle to have within the community. And I think we've seen that already with the meetups. The meetup calendar and the meetup organizations and getting all the different things on the website. It's just tremendous what we've seen so far there. But there's a lot of room to grow still too.
Absolutely. And I know, Craig, before you go to you, so someone did ask us, how can members actively contribute to SPA initiatives? I will say all of the committees are actively recruiting. So if you go to the SPA LinkedIn page, you will see a very well-made poster with most of our happy faces on it. Identify a community that you want to contribute to and literally just ping us, email us. We're collecting ideas right now. Craig, over to you. What's your role? What drew you to the Society for People Analytics, and what do you want to accomplish for 2025?
And I think that question about, one wanting to get involved is just like case in point. We have such a generous community of people who really care about advancing this field. That's something that continues to motivate me today. It initially motivated my interest and my entry into the space. But I think ultimately we all want work to be better for people. We want to see people thrive in work and life. And I've often thought about how best to scale that, right? Like we can do that within our respective organizations, and that's great. We can affect the lives of thousands of people depending on the headcount. But how do we do that beyond just our immediate organization? And so I think a lot about two things. Number one, like, how do we elevate impact for people who are currently in the space? But number two, there are thousands and thousands of organizations that are large enough to benefit from people analytics that don't have access to people analytics. That could be from a budget perspective, a budget constraint. It could also be because they lack awareness of the capabilities and the benefits of investing in people analytics. And I don't know the answer to that, but I think there is a huge opportunity as we think about helping people and organizations thrive on a truly global scale. How do we help other organizations that aren't currently investing in people analytics understand its benefits and the importance of doing this, the strategic advantage, the competitive advantage to doing this? Because I truly believe that from a talent competitiveness perspective, organizations that don't invest in people analytics face competitive disadvantages. And I really want to see people thrive. I love that this community, the SPA community, is very inclusive, and that people come from very different backgrounds, and we welcome them, and we want to equip them with the skills and the capabilities and the resources and connections necessary to elevate their impact. And for me, that's what it's all about. It's about impact for people and for organizations. And I'm just thrilled to be a part of this SPA organization.
That's awesome. Hey, Lydia, real quick before we move on, can I throw it your way too? We'd love to hear how you got involved with SPA and some of your thoughts there too.
So how I got involved with SPA is a series of hapstance conversations. I've been kicking around the people analytics space officially since 2018. And for anyone who started their journey around that time, it felt like a treasure hunt process in a way where you had to have your own little treasure map, your own magnifying glass, and kind of like, okay, who are the influencers out there? Who's putting up content? And Richard, very much your point, a lot of it is vendor generated education content. For me, it's really about bringing the people together, having a singular channel to have these conversations so that there's no need to reinvent the wheel for people to go on treasure hunts themselves, because I'm sure we all have 10, 12-hour day jobs that we may or may not have the luxury of time, despite having the interest, to put the information together and really to think about it. And I think for me, it's also people analytics has come to a point of market saturation in a good way. But at the same time, when all industries hit that point of market saturation, you see little camps breaking out of like, is it dashboarding? Is it data cleansing? Is it the quantitative? Is it the qualitative? And I think it's being able to bring a community together for me to have that holistic conversation that ultimately goes back to the person, their families, those who show up to work on a daily basis, and how do you make their lives a little bit better, even just by a 0.01%. So thank you for that. Okay, we have about 8 minutes left. I am actually going to, because I see Amit in the chat somewhere, his name did come up for me. So I'm actually going to try to answer some of the questions we've had in the chat, and also queue up a conversation for Amit, who I know is curating the educational curriculum and everything else for SPA in 2025. So let's talk about this. We did get a question earlier on about what are some of the skills required to break into the field of analytics, and how do you develop people? I'm going to break this question a little bit more. Take yourself into the lens of someone who's starting their career in people analytics, someone who's mid-career in people analytics, and someone who is at the executive level. So we're going to do it in 3 tiers. What do you think are the skills or the things that each of those folks can do at different stages of their careers? And for the audience listening to us live, if you have any ideas, anything that you want us to put out from a content or an education perspective, ping it live. I am officially using LinkedIn chat as a note taker at the moment. So who wants to start us off?
I can jump in and I'll be quick. I think for early career, I think it used to be things like SQL. And unfortunately, AI has gotten so good at SQL that it's probably not SQL anymore. But those kind of like the advice I've given for early career is get a foot in the door within HR. So whether that's an HRBP role, an HR tech role, an HR ops role, a lot of these roles are becoming more and more analytical over time. And if you can prove yourself as an analytical mind in those early career HR roles, that's a great way to come over to people analytics. For late career, one of the things that I find fascinating is the longer people are in the space, the less reliant on analytics they become. And they start to realize this job is change management, it's resource management, it's the ability to navigate politics. That's more of the job than actually being in the data, which is both frustrating, maybe for people that might not want to go that path. But it's also the reality of like every job becomes a sales job in the long run. And how do you navigate that as you make that change from being a really high executing IC into a leader and a executive within an HR function? And it's unfortunately it's a little less reliant on the data. So I have some thoughts and some interesting things that are happening there as this all shifts and changes too.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Heather or Craig?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of thoughts. An observation maybe at like an executive level, and then just some advice for early career folks in the space. I agree, Richard. I think at the executive level, especially, a lot of it comes down to change management and managing politics, and the ability to look around the corner and anticipate needs before people are asking. Because I think the sweet spot for people analytics is being in a proactive state and not simply reacting to a deluge of requests. I think that's a sign of not being very strategic. I think when we're at the table and we can anticipate needs and we can bring things proactively, then the requests we get are enhancements to these solutions that were pioneered by the central people analytics function. And I think that's indicative of a really strategic PA function. For early career, I would say some of the best things that you could do are number one, your team and your leader matters. I wouldn't underestimate the extent to which they really matter. So find a really developmental leader. And I would also say a mentor who's not your direct supervisor. And I say that because your leader could be the greatest person in the world, but there's something about them being responsible for your performance rating and your merit increases and your bonuses that, depending on your personality, may preclude your ability to really open up and be vulnerable about, I'm struggling with these things and I have these gaps and I'm not sure I'm qualified to do A, B, and C. Can you help me navigate this? And you really need a safe space where you can share those things and you can receive guidance on those things. And so I just think mentorship is so important. But your leader and your team, I can't reinforce enough how much that matters, because if you're a part of an all-star team, that becomes the bar and that becomes the expectation. And I've often, like throughout my career, I've strived to be the least qualified person in the room, right? And that means that I've spent the majority of my career feeling like an imposter, but it also means that through that discomfort came a lot of growth, a lot of development. And I'm confident in saying I wouldn't be where I am today had I not chosen that path. And so just get comfortable being uncomfortable. Take that stretch assignment, even if you don't think you're qualified to do it. Find people who believe in you, find people who can help you through it, who can partner with you, and just keep learning, keep growing.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Heather?
Yeah, so I'll talk about mine more as like approaches, and that some of them apply a little more at different points of your career, but they apply all the way. So starting with, be a data consumer or applier. And you have to do this at all 3 levels, but you'll spend more of your time at the executive level. So this is learn how to consume analytics outputs and how to apply them to problems. How do you take that information and use it to affect change? That set of skills, that is going to be critical thinking, systems thinking, communication. It's going to be cause and effect type skills that you will do more of in an executive type position, but you have to be able to do that at every stage of your career. So you build that all the way through. The middle one is be a data translator. You have to know enough about what is possible with data. You have to know enough to be like, that's garbage. No, thank you. You have to know enough to say, if I have this question, this is the right kind of stuff. This is what possible, this isn't. And here's how I translate it to my data consumers so that they can affect change with it. And you will do more of that in the middle of your career, but you have to be able to do that the whole span. And then the third one is be a data doer. And this is get your hands dirty, get into the data, clean it, produce the results, make sure that there is information for others to translate, to consume, and to apply, and be working on all of those skills. You will spend more of your time on the doer earlier in your career, but because you're working on all of those, you're gonna be geared up and perfect for the long run. That would be kind of my set of skills for you along the way.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And believe it or not, that actually brings us to the top of the hour. I can't believe we literally just spent 60 minutes hanging out with each other. So housekeeping, for those of you who are listening this live or on recording, register to become a SPA member, societyforpeopleanalytics.org. If you want to be more involved, if you have ideas, we're definitely open. Again, go to our LinkedIn page, find that very pretty poster with all of our faces on it, identify the community that you want to contribute to, shoot us a message. I promise we will get back to you. If we missed you for a couple weeks, it is probably just because of the size of our inboxes. We're definitely not ignoring you. And with all that said, thank you so much for joining us for our first live event of 2025. And we incredibly and very much look forward, and I know I speak for everyone here, to building out people analytics, building out the community, and continue all the greatness about people for the rest of the year.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lydia.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Lydia. Thank you,
Bye,
Stephanie.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.